This is the Michael Bryan Show. Hi everyone, welcome back to the show, and today I am joined with Richie Frieman, who has been dubbed the modern day Renaissance man, and we are discussing his book, The Optimistics. We are discussing things like young onset dementia and the effects that has on the whole family, and we're also discussing his book journey and how to be a successful author. Richie, thanks so much for taking the time.
Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it.
So I've heard a rumour that you actually used to be a wrestler. So is that true? And how did you get into writing from that?
The rumors of my subpar fame are true. Yes, I was always a fan of professional wrestling. I know I'm not on camera now. We haven't met in person yet, but at 5'5", a buck 60 at the time, I'm not exactly the poster boy for being a professional wrestler, like off the top rope, WWE kind of stuff. But I always loved it. It was something that I always wanted to do. And to become a professional wrestler, you have to be professionally trained. And to do that, you actually have to go to a school. And there's actually, where you are in England, it's a very, very popular and a form of entertainment, I would say, over the pond. So it's a big deal. And you learn the trick, you learn the magic, and then you start wrestling. And I did it with one of my best friends. He became my tag team partner. And we kind of vowed to do it with keep it, if we could do it together, and we'll do this thing as long as we can. It was about 10 years I did it for, and it was fantastic. I loved it. I loved every minute of it. It was it wasn't very glamorous most of the time. Most of the time, I tell people it's kind of like being in a band. Some places you play that are great, some places you play and you're like, okay, there's more more in the band than there are in the crowd, but it happens. It's the way of entertainment. But I was in college when I first started it, and I was in college studying art. I've always wanted to be an artist and a writer. So I was doing both things at the same time. And, in my early 20s college age idea, I thought, okay, well, this could be a great way to do two things I love full time. And life has a funny way of working itself out. Then not always didn't happen as full time, but still, just something about it in my life I loved, and I still, have a lot of colleagues and friends in the business and both in wrestling, and it was a good way to, it brought out a different side of my personality of being an entertainer, or not being in entertainment. How do you speak? How do you present yourself? How do you have a conversation? These are things that being on any stage is going to help you do in regular life. And in wrestling, it was a huge, huge lesson to be learned pretty much every single week.
So what kind of things did you learn from your time as a wrestler then? And would you say you carried them with you today?
Oh, absolutely carry them with me today. I mean, I definitely won't. I'm not going to say that I was definitely always I was not a shy person at all. Extrovert, enjoy talking to people, enjoying being around folks. I enjoy my quiet time too, but with wrestling, you're portraying a character, you're portraying an image, and you have people that are in the crowd coming to see you and expecting a show. And whether or not you're feeling great that day, or whether or not you even like the match that you have scheduled, it's your job to perform. So there is no only doing it part way. And in wrestling, you are working with somebody else in the ring. Your job is to make that person look good just as much as they're trying to make you look good. And if you don't do that mutually, it basically breaks the code that we all basically adhere to. Be safe, help each other out, make each other look good, entertain the crowd, things like that. So that was one lesson I heard too. It's, how do you really work with people in that situation to help them and propel them? But when you stand in the middle of a ring with a bunch of drunk people and here you are in pleather pants, and I got baby oil on my body for the shine. I got gel spiked in my hair. I mean, this is the early 2000s. So, and then I'm on a microphone, or I'm in a ring and I'm fighting. I need the audience to really be into it. And if not, how do I pivot? Because I don't want to disappoint them, and I don't want to disappoint the people that I wrestle with. It's not fair to them. So it teaches you a lot about self-confidence, teaches you a lot about how to work on the fly. And overall, it's something that I believe is a very close parallel to what every person does in any job. And how do you really work with people around you? How can you put your feelings aside and present a face to the public that may not be what you're feeling right now, but is something that you have to do to, because that's the commitment you made. But it also was about how not being, breaking out of your shell. It's fun. It was something that taught me that even though I wasn't necessarily a shy person, I carried myself a lot differently than I did when I became a wrestler than before. It's just something you felt. It's something that is part of you that no one could take away.
And why writing them? What gave you the idea for the Optimistics?
So, I mean, writing for me was always something I wanted to do. I loved looking at books and reading books growing up to the best I could. But ironically, my road to literature was not something that most people would think that, you're in Oxford and, you go to college and if you want to be a writer and you take classes and you get all these great grades and you have these other kinds of, lineage possibilities of other writers around you or something. But that was not me. In fact, I had a very bad learning disability growing up. And this is the 80s and 90s. It wasn't really something people talked about, or it wasn't something that was as diagnosed or anything. So I didn't read a full book cover to cover until my senior year of college. And that is a fact. I'm not trying to romanticize my situation at all. I basically skimmed my way, puttered my way through books. I never fully read. And it was, mentally hypocritical for me because I was wanting to be a writer. I wanted to be in the arts and things like that. And here I am not being able to really do that part. How can I be a writer if I'm not even reading? And that's a big part of what writers have to do. So once I started really embracing reading and all forms of literature, and in college, I fell in love with my major of art. I was actually doing things that I wanted to do. I loved learning about artists. I loved learning about art history. I loved reading about different philosophies that pertain to literature and art. So here I was embracing something I enjoyed. Growing up in school, you are told what to read. And look, I have kids. They have to read certain books and I know why they're reading it. But at the time, you're kind of frustrated. You're like, I don't know. This is boring. Or you look back, you realize it really wasn't that boring. But it was something that I had to really embrace. And I always wanted to do it. It wasn't something where I was running a parallel worlds of, wrestling and writing and, okay, let's see what happened. I mean, I always tell people that my path is not so much an A to B. It wasn't that one straight line. It was more like a Jackson Pollock painting where it's all kind of coming together. But for me, it makes sense. Like I look at entertainment and wrestling and art and writing. They're all forms of entertainment. They are forms of presenting something to the public. And you do it because of that. This whole idea that this tortured artist who doesn't like to show their work or people read their books, like, I don't buy into that at all. I mean, that is just, then why do this? Then sit in your basement and play your music or sit at your computer and just write all day, which is totally fine. But if you put yourself out there, it's because you want the responses back of people enjoying the work that you put your heart and soul into. And when it comes to the Optimistics, this was my 8th book in about a 20-year span, a little less than 20 years. And it was something that I'd never done before. It was a memoir. It was not something that I had always thought about doing. It was one of these situations where I was at the right spot at the right time for a really amazing story to be there. And I heard the origin of the Optimistics, of me finding them, was about, this is in 2022. And I'm at a Alzheimer's walk in Baltimore, where I live, in Maryland. And there was a gentleman that stood up at a podium before the walk at the opening ceremonies. And he was talking about how him and two people he met, they became best friends because they all had young onset dementia, which is early, kind of like what people think early onset is, dementia or Alzheimer's. But this is young onset, which is basically people in their 40 to 60. And I've seen folks in their 30s. So you think about us who have lives, and I'm 46 years old at the time. I was around 43 or so, and here I am thinking like this could be me one day. Like I could be. I can't imagine stopping my life right now, and my wife and my kids. What would they do? I'm the provider, and I drive around for my kids' sports, and this is my life. I can't imagine what it would be like to know that I have to stop my life. It's flipped around, and also I know I'm facing a disease with no cure, and that's what Alzheimer's and dementia is. So while I'm listening to, his name is Dennis, talk, he mentioned that those two gentlemen he met, they really became his lifeline. They found each other through a support group founded by, it's called the YES group, Young Onset Dementia Education and Support. YES. And through that group, which dedicates to people with young onset, they found a bond that they never had in their lives before. And here they are, three strangers that never knew what it was like to go through something like this so early. And they bonded with each other immediately. And from there, they dubbed themselves the Optimistics as a way of living their final years in a positive light or to the best of their ability. And it hit me. Everybody in the crowd was just like blown away by listening to Dennis speak. And it hit me hard. I have family members with Alzheimer's. I've lost family members with Alzheimer's and dementia. And it was just a check to my life, like, wow, I can't imagine what that would be like. And could you be optimistic about that? Like, there's no way. I mean, it just, I don't know how you could do it. So that's what led to the fascination of the Optimistics and hearing about what it was like. And I reached out to Dennis's wife on Facebook. Turns out he lives literally a mile behind me, and we have a lot of mutual friends in a way. I emailed his wife on Facebook about, hey, cold said, look, I'm an author. Here's an idea. I saw your husband speak. I just think there's something there. Would it be okay if I talk to you about it? And then I talked to to Dennis's family with his daughters. Then they spoke to Jim, who's one of the other Optimistics, and then Mike, who's the third. And we did a Zoom call, and I explained my idea. I said, look, I have no publisher. I have no plan other than I just think there's something here, and I would love the opportunity to share that with people. And they said, sure. And then it was up to me to try to figure out how to get this done. And that was an adventure in itself. But there was a lot of pressure I put on myself too, in the fact that I was dealing with time. And it was something where time was against all of us, in the fact that if I didn't put this together soon enough, then the people around me who were in the book would not be able to enjoy it. And I was very stressed out about that part, but I was also motivated by it. And what I thought was going to be just three people's stories, it ended up being, when I went to the first YES group they invited me to, I realized there's a lot of people like them as well, which I didn't know. And I realized there's a lot more stories to tell. So I went from telling the story of three people who are Optimistics to dozens of people who can call themselves Optimistics. So every chapter in the book is somebody else's different story about how they face young onset dementia, and also how they were able to live with it and what they've learned. And at the end of the day, how do you stay optimistic? It's a challenge, and everybody has a different take on it. So some of the chapters had the people living with it. Some of them were their children or their spouses. And it was, in every situation, I just learned something more about life's journey through every time I was brought into their world. And it was just very, very overwhelming from start to finish.
Wow, that's really fascinating when you end up learning as you're writing it as well and speaking to these people. And is there anything that happened to you why you went on this journey? Like, what kind of things did you go through and think about, and some of the things that you experienced as well?
Yeah, it's everything was life changing for me. And I know that the term life changing kind of gets cliche, where it's, everything can be, you look at everything you do as a life changing moment. You get a new job and you meet a new person, you get married, you have kids. Everything is life changing to some capacity. But for me, it was something where at the time in my life, it was a realization about life that challenged everything I knew. It was scary that people that were my age would be stung with this disease. And it was something that we thought about. Only you think about elderly people. I mean, I opened up the first chapter. I talked about my buddy growing up, watching her go through it as a teenager, but she was also in her 80s and her late, and you're like, okay, well, it's terrible, but she's my bubby, my grandma. So it's an old person's disease. It doesn't affect anybody else. But then you realize that it's not, and it's a sad way to look at that. It's not just an old person's disease. In the community, we call Alzheimer's and dementia a family disease because it does affect everybody. But when I brought myself into the different worlds of the people in my book, I was learning. I didn't know who they were really. For the most part, we interacted a little bit through email or for the phone, then set up the time for the interview. But I didn't know their whole story. I didn't want to know until I heard it from them live. And every single interview I did, we cried. It became a joke because every time I interviewed somebody, they would say like, "Hey, I know that you make people cry, so I'm not going to do it this time." And I'm like, "Look, I don't make people cry, for the record. Don't look at me as like that guy." And it was, but it was a reality because you are talking about something emotional, and I became invested in their lives as family. I look at them all as family, and I'm not their family. I know that. I'm not their care partner and caretaker, but it is something that I've invested in personally. And every person's story had just really taught me something different. But at the end of the day, there were really two main things that that really hit me the most. Well, there's a lot, but when we use this phrase in the book, and I use it with everything I talk about with the optimistics, the phrase time is important, 3 words. And I say that because when I first interacted with Dennis, Mike, and Jim, the 3 optimistics, I was emailing with Dennis. At the time, he could email very easily. Now it's not so much. And I told him, I said, great news. I got a publisher. I got a book deal. We're going to go ahead and we're going to make this, we're going to do it. And so many words. And he wrote back to me that he said, and I have his email that he had wrote to me. This is the email that the phrase time is important came out of. So this is what I wrote. This type of book has never been done, but needless to say, I'm optimistic. Thank you all so much for agreeing to allow me into your lives. I want to make this a lot of fun, and I won't let you down. So Dennis emailed me back, Richie, I'm glad we all may be revving up again. Time is important. Now that you know Deborah, who runs the Yes organization, I wonder if there is some element of Beshert involved. Looking forward to a cup of coffee, good friends, and creativity. And Beshert is Hebrew for, a kingship, a love, a moment. It's Beshert, a moment like that of happiness and, coming together. I'm Jewish, and so is Dennis. So it was something when Dennis said time is important. I don't know if he really meant it in as profound as I had taken and embraced it. But from that moment on, time is important. The phrase alone, it just rocked everything I knew, because you realize time is important. Time is limited. And what are you going to spend your time on now? Are you going to care about the obnoxious people that you run into that you have to deal with, or no? That's not part of me. And what about the job you hate? How long can you possibly stay miserable? No, I can't do that. Relationships, what is it? I have kids. I want to spend every moment I can with my kids, but I got to let them be kids too. My wife, and how do I make sure that every time with her is impactful. So, and when my family, my mom lives in Boca Raton, Florida, and my dad lives in Annapolis, which is about an hour from me, where my mom is, several states away. And how much time am I going to have with them? So it challenges everything you know about constructing your life. So that was one thing that I definitely really put down. And in fact, I'm looking at the piece of paper now. I have a little post-it on my desk that says the words "time is important." And then I wrote that down the same day that Dennis told me about it, and from his email, and I just look at it every day on my desk, just a little reminder, because it's challenging, because it's not always something that you can stick to. You get lazy, you get tired, you procrastinate. There's depression involved, there's anxiety, and things that'll stop you from progressing, which we all go through. And then it leads me to, the next part of, can you stay optimistic? And I'm not the rainbows and butterflies person in the world. I can I am not somebody that wakes up every day thinking that today's going to be fantastic, and oh my gosh, there's little birds floating around, and everybody's going to be super duper friendly, which is something that I realize is somewhat hypocritical in a way from the title of the book. But that's not, it's the irony of that, because people would tell me, they're like, oh, there's Mr. It's Mr. Optimistic. All right. And I'm like, wait a second, guys, hold up. I'm not Captain Optimistic on this one. It is, there's the irony of how do you stay up, the challenging point of it. And it was something that I had to really embrace, because it's almost something that was like taunting me, right? Like optimism. Here you are, you're promoting optimism, but you're not optimistic. And I am optimistic, but not like to the point of I am now carrying the flag, but now I am carrying the flag. And so it was something where it really just started to challenge me and challenge my idea of what I wanted to be in life and how I wanted to be remembered, and then my commitment to the people that I made in the book. So it's continually a daily journey, I should say.
Oh, I can only imagine. It must be difficult to live with the contradictions as well. How to stay optimistic? Well, maybe it's not just about that, but when things are bad or when you're going through something, your ability to let that go and then guide your way to becoming optimistic again, maybe that's the skill, maybe that's the whole idea, but you need to have those two contradictions. You need to believe them both, I guess, at the same time.
Exactly. And I think that it's, the reality is we all want to have a positive view about life, and we should. I mean, it's life is what you make of it. It's cliche, I know, and live by the moment, but it is true in that aspect. It's something where, if you are going to you wake up two ways, feeling miserable, or feeling that you're going to kick the miserable out for the time being. And I think that that's something that we all are trying to work with going forward. But I also, it was a challenge to me, because I owe it to the people in the book. Since I've written the book, there have been people that have passed away. There have been people that have gotten worse. And I am part of that world now. And it's a reality. And I owe it to them to keep it forward. I mean, there was a person, sadly, unfortunately, this past summer, Jim passed away. And when you see Jim, he's a good looking guy, 6'3" or 6'4", whatever, something like that. And played 3 sports in college. He was a COO of a major hospital. He was in line to be the CEO of a hospital. This is a guy that had everything. And then alone, he gets this in his 50s. So it's something where losing him, that was the first pin. Seeing Dennis as much as I can, and he's in different phases now of declining, and it breaks my heart, and then also when I wrote the book, and there was one girl I interviewed named Sarah, her mom, she was writing about, it was about her mom, and she was in her early 20s, and her mom had young onset. And I think within less than 2 months, her mom passed away before the book even came out, by the time I interviewed her. So it's one of these things where I want the message of the optimistics to be more than just about having an idea about life. It's more about something where we can all be optimists in some way, shape, or form. We all should be optimists. And what are we going to do to basically have that part of our lives shown? It's not a full-time gig, but it is a good thing to have in the times that you need it.
I'd be really curious to know about how you handled the emotions of it all. You mentioned people passing away before and after the book came out, and it made me think that that must have been so hard to deal with and handle, and I'm wondering how you were able to do it.
It was something that I kind of had to make peace with before I put the book and I pour the book out, because it was the realization that this is something that we're still fighting to find a cure for. And it wasn't it wasn't something I knew that would be an overnight situation where by the time the book came out, everybody's cured of Alzheimer's and dementia. It's just not happening. So I had to, but I didn't want to think about it. And I know everybody's getting worse, and I know that they're declining. And it was something that was just the reality of what was being brought. And it was still something that I think about daily, but there's nothing I can do about that part. And I donate portions of my book sales to the Yes Foundation. I donate to Alzheimer's Foundation. I try to be an advocate for awareness and bringing the communities together about it to the best of my ability. It's not always going to be something I can do, but I'm trying very hard to be that person for them and to let them know that I'm still trying to fight the fight. So I'm doing what's needed and doing the best I can, but I always want to do more. And this book was nothing like something that I had in the past, where you put a book out, you love it, and look, it is your heart, your soul, it's your life. It's like, oh, I put this thing out, I want people to enjoy it, and I want to promote it, I want to be there for it. But this was something where I realized it's a long ball game, and not so much about just finding the cure, but something that there are too many people, and also including myself, that I owe to make sure this is not just a book that comes out. This is a mission, and this is a mission I'm putting my entire life into, of the optimistics becoming more than just a book and a narrative of the positive and the sadness. Is that it could be anything with people dealing with any form of disease, anybody dealing with mental health, anybody dealing with divorce. It's, how are we all going to be optimistic in that time? And it is, like I said, hypocritical and challenging for me too, because I am often asking myself that question when I'm faced with something like that. So it just comes down to the commitment that I know there's more out there for the optimistics to grow. And I want to make sure that more people can understand that the concept is out there, and there's more people like us than there are not.
What were some of the lessons that you learned as a result of this? Is there anything that maybe surprised you about how someone could be more optimistic, or maybe even stay optimistic despite some of the bad things that are happening to people? What are some of the things that surprised you there?
Yeah. So, I mean, like I said earlier, I mean, there were so many less, everybody's story taught me something different, but there were some that really stuck out, some facts. And so there were several people I spoke with in the book where, and I asked everybody the question, what it was like when you found out you were diagnosed. You walk in, the doctor tells you it's this. Like, how do you react? And I mean, how would you react? How would I react? And ironically, there were more people than not that were just like, okay, well, this is what it is. Nothing I can do about it. Let's go on. And it was, I don't know, and this is coming from them, it's coming from their care partners and their spouses, their kids. And I was just shocked by it. I couldn't understand how, like, what do you mean that's okay? How can you tell me that's going to be something that is okay from jump, right? I didn't understand that, but what else are you going to do? And that was something I had to really understand fully too. I was still, that still, kind of kicks my butt around every day. I'm like, I don't think I'd be that positive. It's like, I get mad if I get, my car won't start in the morning, or a flat tire, or I miss a meeting, or things like that. Now I'm going to tell you that I'm going to be okay with learning that I'm diagnosed with something with no cure. But it was something where they had to do it together. And I also learned about really what it means to be loved. And I mean, I love my wife, I love my family, I love my kids, but you're never really known the test until you realize that you have to be there for your partner. You say your vows and you are now have to do this for your partner when you still have full lives together. You're doing this in your 50s, and these are people that have full-time jobs. They're ready for retirement, retirement's 15 years away, 10 years away. They want to see their future grandkids. They want to watch or their kids get married. And this isn't a life that you thought about when you were on exchanging your vows in sickness and in health, that you really thought the sickness was going to be coming early on. You just don't want to think about it. You shouldn't think about it. And how would you react to it? And are you going to be there for your loved one? Parent, I'm talking about spouse, child, parent, etc. And it was something that I really had. It was interesting how people were embracing that. And luckily and fortunately, for the sake of humanity, they all embraced it with open arms. I also, interesting was the question about religion and God. Now, I mean, I'm Jewish. I love being Jewish. I also love Christmas. I have many family members who are Christian. I've been to, and I know people who are Muslim or Buddhist. Religion is something that everybody has on their own. And there's really, and, I don't go to temple all the time. I do it and observe my religion my own way, and I love it. But there are people that are more religious. And then it comes the question of, okay, well, how do you talk to God about what's going on if God has a plan? And now it's this plan. But the issue about religion really came up when one of the chapters I was talking with was a woman, and her husband, Mark, he had already passed away. He was a pastor. So immediately I'm thinking to myself, he had to have been mad. Like, he had to have been frustrated with God. Here I am. I committed my life to God and to being an advocate and to help people. And he ran a church and he brought people together, and he was known for advice of happiness in times people need him. And she said, no, once he was diagnosed, he realized, well, this is the new path God has for me. And he still embraced it. And I remember she said he went to like a meeting for like a larger group meeting, and with other people living with dementia. And, he walked over to one of the other people in the audience and, put his arm around her and talked to her like a pastor. So he still found purpose. And to me, as somebody that, again, I'm not super religious, it was a very eye-opening experience from the view of somebody who is, when you kind of expect them to be mad. It was something where this is what I have to do now. I found that to be very, very inspiring and very eye-opening.
I can imagine you had to go through quite a lot, especially when the book's out now, it's been well received and that sort of thing. What sort of things could you share about when you went from concept to book? There was a situation where you had to get a publisher and organize those sorts of things. What was that like?
So it's interesting because getting a publisher is the hardest part. I think anybody who's written a book, when you first start out, you fight tooth and nail to get a publisher or an agent, things like that. It's never easy, and it's still not easy. And I have friends of mine and colleagues that are very well established. They've won awards that are once in a lifetime achievements, and they've been let go by their publisher, or they couldn't get one book they wanted published. So it's an ironic, weird thing in the business about what makes people tick, and on the other side. So that was something I knew was going to be challenging. But ironically, with this book, I didn't have the book written. So for anybody out there that wants to write a book, like, no one cares about ideas. Everybody's got ideas. I mean, I have 1,000 ideas right now on my desktop that have a paragraph to them that'll never see the light of day. But no one cares about that in the publishing world. They want to see the end product. But here I am. It's like, well, I don't have time to wait until the end. I don't have time to do the interviews, write the book, then shop it, then see if somebody will take it. Like, I need to do it now. And I naively thought that they would agree with me, and they did not. And there was actually one of the big five publishers. They flat out told me, they're like, I like the idea, but this isn't something where, what do you have written for it? And I basically said the whole thing. I have nothing. Like, well, what do you, they're like, Richie, this is, how this works. Like, we're not just going to give you an idea. And again, I'm not I was not in the level, and nor am I now, to demand anything, from that aspect of it. But one of the people had told me, when I talked about the idea as well, they said that, this is a sad book. People don't want to read about Alzheimer's when they're sitting on the beach. And I was like, okay, I heard rumor is the old book, the Notebook, did pretty well, but okay, that's fine. Good argument. So and it was something that I understood, but I was very frustrated with. But I realized that I was up against another argument, and I couldn't take that the no as the final answer. And I found a publisher who has published one of my books in the past, and I explained it to her and said, I don't know what it's going to be, but I need you to believe in that it's going to be something, but I have to know that there's commitment there. And she said, absolutely. I understand. I like what you're doing. Let's go. And we did. So it took somebody to believe in me to make it happen. Because again, time is important. I was against time. It's, the average, even if I were to write, get a contract today, and it's like, hey, Mike, so congratulations, you got a contract to write a book, and it's already done. Well, your book's not coming out for like 18 months. So that's if the book is done. 12 maybe. So I'm working on a book on a piece right now, and it won't come out till next November. So and mine's it's part of a catalog of others. So that's just the way the industry works, and I needed somebody to understand that with me, and I found somebody to do that, and they supported it, and they put their whole backing behind me to believe in my mission.
Now, you mentioned that you were a little bit naive at the time. I wonder, is there anything else that perhaps authors aren't aware of? Anything that they think this is how it works, but in fact it doesn't? It works a different way.
Well, yeah, I say I'm naive because, look, I knew how. This is my 8th book. I've been published by Macmillan, St. Martin's Press. I've been published by smaller independent presses. My first book I self-published because I just thought it would be fun to have out. So I've been all around the block, and you learn different levels of where people's commitments are, and the good and the bad. Everybody's got it. So I wasn't naive to think that it was just going to be easy, right? And at the time, I had interest in my work that I thought they would embrace this piece as well. But the reality was, again, I didn't have anything written, and I wasn't really at the time to demand that. But it's something that I was frustrated, because it's like, how can you not love this idea? How can you not think this is the most beautiful story you've ever heard in your life? I was very frustrated. It's like, no one calls your baby ugly. But it is part of the literary world and the art world, where you have to understand criticism. You can't embrace the compliments without the negatives. It's just the reality of what it is. So that was frustrating, but I wasn't naive in the fact that I didn't know how the business works, but I was just more like, how this is going to wow. I'm going to wow them. This is going to turn heads. Come, Richie, now let me fly you to New York right away. Not to the degree, but I was very optimistic that they would get it. But it didn't happen that way. And I found solace in the fact that I wasn't alone. And like I said, I have friends, close friends, and and also general colleagues that are in the literary world, that are in the film world, that are still on top of the game, top. And they don't always hear yes. And I didn't know that till they told me. And I was just blown away, because to me, it's like, what are you talking about? You go walk in there with, just a pen and paper and a nap. You can write a napkin and write a story, and they'll sell it, and they'll buy it right away. It's like, no, it's like everything is as good as what the time is right now. And that's how the business works. It's not, there was, when I first started out, if you remember the movie Twilight, Twilight, the book, and the vampires and stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah. So big, everybody loved it. It was a huge hit. at that time, everybody was pitching vampire stories. Like it was like agents were getting stuff daily, hundreds of like the best vampire story you've ever heard kind of thing. And it was a good time for vampire stories for a while, but and some to be made into films. But after a while, it's like, wait a second, I don't want any more vampire stuff. Okay, so take your vampire stuff away. It's over with. So that was a trend that stopped. So there's, and then there's also things about nowadays reality stars are making, quote unquote, making books, for the fact they're not making books, by the way. They're talking to somebody and that person writes it down for them. Don't want to kind of pull the wool over the literary world, but if you push a book out in 3 months, you didn't write it. So it's in that aspect of it, but it's something where there are trends and there are ways that what the industry is looking for and where you stand in that part of the, what cog you are in that machine. So it may be something great, but it might not be something they want right now. There's a great story about J.K. Rowling and Harry Potter. If you ever read about her, how Harry Potter came to fruition, she was rejected from everybody. And there was one person that believed in her, and I might be getting a little bit of the story wrong, but the gist is the same. It's that there was a person who was a reader at a publishing house, and the reader basically gets all the manuscripts ahead of time, and they're the ones that say yay or nay to give to the editor. And that's a real job. People do that. So it was getting, the one person really liked it, took it to the editor said, no, this is not for us. She took it again, editor said no. And, the person wrote, got back to J.K. Rowling and said, look, I want to make this happen. I really believe in you. Just give me a little bit more time. And lo and behold, the editor finally said yes. And next thing you know, the rest is history. So it was it's persistence on the other side of the literary world and the publishing world that the artist can control. You don't know who's going to get your work and think and fall in love with it. When you pitch an agent, they might, agents cover certain genres only. Like they work for a company and their job is only to write about podcasters from England. Don't give me anything about history. Don't give me anything about athletes. I write books about podcasters from England. That's it. So if you pitch them something as sci-fi, they're like, look, I can't do this. So it's a no. Like you won't even feel like you even got anywhere because you pitched it to the wrong person. So understanding who your market is great. And understanding the agent, understanding the publisher, what they actually do. The big mistake a lot of writers make is, well, I'm going to go ahead. I mean, this person published a book I like, it may not have been like the book on writing, but you know what? I think they'll like mine too. And you realize they don't do anything about that, right? It's you wrote a fiction book and you're writing a nonfiction book about one of the presidents. It just doesn't, it's not your wrong audience. You really got to know who your market, who you're selling it to, and who you're pitching it to. And even when you get to that part, you got to hope that the person on the other side of the screen likes it. And you might get somebody that day that doesn't. It might, it's just the reality of what it is. Hearing no in this business, regardless of what level you are in it, is just a reality. And, you go back to what you mentioned about, like the thing about wrestling. I mean, look, nobody thought I was going to be a professional wrestler. And when you see me now, obviously, I'm 46 years old, but it's still people like, there's no way. And, it is what it is. And I mean, so I heard no all the time. And it was something you just get used to. In the art world, not everybody likes your stuff. And when you go, if anybody's ever taken an art class in a college or university, it's when you do the critique sessions, even if you like the people in your class, it's your job to critique. You owe it to the artist. And you're like, oh, wow, geez, oof, that was rough. Man, I didn't realize that part. But they're right. I mean, there's certain, and you have to realize how to, you put your ego aside and realize that for the betterment of what the activity and what the process is going to be, you owe it to yourself to be able to pivot and change. But those no's are going to happen. And you just have to worry. You have to hope that the person who finally says yes truly embraces what you're trying to do, and you remain solid to your core about that.
I get the impression as well, Richie, that, when you've got an idea, you've got a concept for a book or a story, and everyone seems to be of the mindset of, I just have to sell it. I just have to go
Yeah.
into the meetings, sell the story, promote it, turn into this salesman, with trying to sell the car, so to speak, and they go on about the engine and the noise it makes, and someone sat at the other end of the table thinking, but there's no car there. It's all just words in a story. You need to see this car. What is this car? And all you've got is the story and the marketing behind it, which seems like they're immune to all of that, and you need to actually show them the book.
Yeah, I mean, and that's at the end of the day, the book is what matters. Like I mentioned before, it's, the people that have this thing where they don't want people to know who they are, they don't want to talk about their work, and you know what, but they still sell. God bless them. That's not me. I mean, I don't look at it as like I wrote books and I do art and I do things because I want to share with people, not because I want some gratitude coming my way and like hearing praise. I do it because that's what an artist does. You put your work out there for people to enjoy. It's up to them to interpret it. And in the same sense, the people on the other side of the table that are going to be, they're investing in you to do it, they need to know the work will validate their time putting into it. What's the ROI for them to commit to you? And that, there are tens of thousands of fantastic artists right now and writers by you in Oxford right now, sitting in a coffee shop or in their office or in their basement, writing something. So when people are going to market about getting their book published, the person who's saying yes is making room in their system and in their supply chain of books to say, I'm going to give it to Mike. That's great. And that's their focus. So it's a big commitment on that part. And it is a business. Art is business. That's the reality of it. And I talk to a lot of artists that, they're like, well, I just want to, again, it's the person who doesn't want to do the promotion themselves or be seen. It's like, the art speaks for itself. It's like, no, it doesn't. This is not, it may have in the past, but it isn't. You have to be a marketer. You have to be a salesman, a salesperson. You have to be somebody who understands the creative outlets that are needed. You have to understand the media world. And that's not to say that you have to master all, but you have to be able to embrace it. And it's not something where, you are the used car salesman. Let me just put you in any car you want. Here it is. But it's more about you as a person that's giving your work to a publisher. The publisher is going to do their job. You owe it to the publisher, the person who's paying you to do it. And you owe it to the subjects in your book, if they're real or even just fictitious characters. I owe it to this work. I owe it to the years I spent writing it. I owe it to myself and my time I put into it to do everything I can to make the book the best it can be and to make people understand it. And that means doing things that maybe aren't the normal out of your comfort zone, but that's the reality. And I think that a big part of some publishers they might not, if they don't see that part and they don't see your ability to do that, that could be something where the work can only be so good because they're going to need something, especially nowadays. I mean, look, sadly, a lot of publishers and agents are looking at what's your social media following. It's like, oh God, if we were judging books by that, I mean, that's a wacky way of doing things, but it is because in their mind, they're like, look, we got to get this thing out there. So if you have a bunch of followers, well, that's going to make my job a lot easier. And the return is going to be much greater because it's likely to sell better because you have an audience already. Fair, by the way, very fair, but also very frustrating because not everybody has that. So you owe it to the company, you owe it to the public, and you owe it to yourself to be all of those things. And you really can't shy away from it. So that's something that is a lesson I learned earlier on, but I also learned that as part of my strength. Again, being a wrestler, it's like, I've spoken in front of people that booed me, hated me. Some followed me in the parking lot. That's not gonna happen in the literary world though. But it was, I faced worse than hearing no from a publisher. But I also, it's about how are you going to present yourself to the public and your ability to, even though you're hearing no, or even though you're uncomfortable about it. I mean, I didn't like hearing boos but even though if I was a bad guy, I want the boos, but it's still a lot. And, but that's your job. That's your commitment to it. And you owe it to the people that are watching. If not, then stick to just writing on your computer and playing music in your basement. Nothing wrong with it, but when you step to this level, you have to put everything in your body into the work. And I feel like that's very well owed on all parts of the system.
That's a very interesting point, and it makes me think if there's anything that you can think of that is the difference between authors that make it and authors that don't, authors that get yeses and authors that may not get yeses just yet, but they've got to keep going. What's the difference between those two? What makes an author get their shot or get their chance or get their big break versus authors that don't?
And it's something that I know part of the answer, not the whole answer, because we can all, I mean, how many times do you look on Netflix or Amazon or Hulu and you're like, how did this movie get made? Like, who wrote this? Like, how did that person get put into this movie? Like, they're terrible. And you're like, but timing, opportunity, right place, there is a science to that. There is a, that person stuck it out. But for whatever reason, their book made it and their work made it into the hands of a producer that liked the work they had. So it's a lot. That's a big part of it. But it's also about that. I think it comes down to really just the persistence. I mean, if you look around and go online on Amazon or go into your local bookstore and you look at some of the books, and again, you're like, how did this book get made? This is terrible. But somebody believed in it. Somebody on the other side of the table who has the power to make the book happen believed in it. But it was also the person who, and when I say book, whether it could be the musician or the actor, somebody's believing in yourself enough to not give up. And that's really what it comes down to. I like we're doing a podcast like this. I mean, you and I didn't know each other before we connected. I mean, it's an honor to do this and I love doing this. But I'm committed to making sure that I'm doing my part for your show and being able to meet the requirements that you require from people that you interview. And that's the big part of it. And I enjoy that part, but I'm committed to it. And there's a lot of people that maybe won't want to reach out or accept an invitation. So it's a big part about just putting yourself out there is what makes it. I mean, every band in the world has been told they're never going to make it, but they drove around in their van eating ramen noodles and takeout until they finally got their break. But that's what they were committed to. And if you don't do that, you're not going to make it. I did not make it to WWE, not because I'm 5'5", but I had a job, I had a family, or I was starting a family, and I didn't have it in me to leave, not having health insurance for a little while to wrestle all these shows across the country to maybe make it on TV. I admittedly did not have that drive. I wish I did. There may be a different part of my life I maybe would have, but that's really what it comes down to. It's the drive and the commitment of just being persistent and making sure that people feel confident in the work you're doing. And you should be proud of yourself. You should be proud of the fact that you've made it this far to some place and your ability to get one step closer. And that's what it comes down to. Nobody, people, when I'm able to do I've had some fantastic opportunities as a result of my work, and nobody knows the pain and suffering, the legitimate pain and suffering and tirelessness and anxiety that went into making one nice thing happen, and so because I get this where people ask me like, what are you working on now? And I'm like, I got some things going on. They're like, you never like to tell me anything. And I'm like, well, because if I tell you it now and it doesn't happen, you're going to ask me why it didn't happen and think it was a failure, when in reality it just wasn't ready right now, it wasn't the right time, or it's still going on. This is a process. It's not something where it's just not an overnight thing. And a lot of people don't get that part. And they only want to celebrate it when it hits and when you're out there and when they can point to it. But no one really likes to talk about the parts where you were struggling up to get it. You were waiting tables for 10 years until you finally got your break. You were playing gigs at fraternity houses in college towns and bars with 5 people in it until you finally had somebody, one song that really hit and took off. It just happens. You have to do that. This is the part of the game where persistence is key. And you got to be a dog about it. That's just really, I mean, that's just how any industry works. And it's about that commitment to yourself. So at the end of the day, it really comes down to, I want more for myself, and I'm willing to accept the bad that comes my way as just a part of life in this process.
So what would be your biggest lesson, Richie? You've gone through a lot. This is fascinating to learn about what you've been through. I wonder what your biggest lesson would be.
The biggest lesson I would say is that you have to really love this part of what you're doing. Um, you know, I've heard, again, if I could print out every rejection I had, I could, I could wallpaper Buckingham Palace with it. It's not, I mean, it's just a part of the business. Everything is. And it's just something where I want something better, and I put my time into it, that I believe in what I'm doing. And it's not arrogance. It's not being cocky. It's just being confident in wanting something that you've always wanted. And you owe it to yourself to try. I mean, I've been able to do a lot of things, but not all well, and not all went well. But I call myself a professional trier, because if I like something or have an idea for something, well, I'll go try it, or I'll research it, or, there's somebody out there that maybe knows somebody that knows somebody. I mean, I grew up and I didn't know one person in literature. I didn't know one person in art. So to think I was going to be an artist was, again, I might as well said I was going to be an astronaut, because, oh, well, that person was an astronaut. Like, this is not something that has a very identifiable line to start to finish. And I was blind about everything, and I was naive about it, but I embraced that part with humility and just fully immersed myself in groups, in writing groups, and on LinkedIn and different networking groups, on social media. I traveled to conferences, or I met with somebody that ended up being that I stayed in friends with. Next thing you know, they become something, and we're helping each other out. I've done tons of stuff for free, because you have to kind of get your name out there. But it all comes down to the point of, the biggest lesson is, how bad do you want it, and how much do you owe it to yourself? And if you can be happy with what you're doing, if you go look at yourself in the mirror every day and be content with how you've done, that's fantastic. And I don't know if I'll ever get to the point in my life where I'll be 100% satisfied with work and where it is, but I like to know that I'm trying every day to get there. And I love this part. So it's just a big part of wanting to see it through.
Well, Richie, that's a fascinating way to end this. This has been really interesting. I've enjoyed learning all about this. For those that are interested and wanting to learn more about you, how could they do that? How could they enter your world?
So you can go on my website, richiefrieman.com, richiefrieman. You can find links to all my books. Look out for The Optimistics, and go on Amazon and try to find it, and any other place available. Also on social media, follow me on Instagram, at Richie Frieman, on LinkedIn. All my stuff is the same. So I look forward to catching up with everybody. And please, if anybody out there wants to connect, I'm more than happy to talk, more than happy to chat.
Thanks so much for being a guest on the show. Those that are listening, feel free to subscribe, share the show, tell others, and also leave a review wherever you are listening into your podcasts. Richie, it's been great. Thanks so much, and I look forward to keeping in touch. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you.